I know that when you hear what I'm about to say, you'll think I've gone mad. I would think so myself if I hadn't lived every second of it. 2002 back when I was just a young FBI agent, serving as a scientific consultant, I received a call that shattered everything I believed about evolution, biology, and humanity itself. That night, trapped in a secret facility in Washington state, I witnessed something so impossible that it threatened my career, my sanity, and my life. Today, I finally decided to tell you all about it. Bigfoot, and about our true origin. My name is Agent Elise Morgan, ... and this is the story the FBI tried to bury along with everything that remained of me. Before becoming a federal agent, I was an evolutionary biologist. My life's goal was to understand the tree of life, its lost branches, and the species that disappeared without a trace. I never imagined that it would be precisely this knowledge that would place me face to face with the greatest biological secret ever recorded, that Bigfoot exists, ... and that its origin is much older than science has dared to admit. It all started on the night of September 14, 2002. I was in my small office inside the FBI's Biological Analysis Division in Quantico when I received a direct call from an internal line number I had previously thought was inactive. On the other end, the voice was dry, emotionless. Agent Morgan? We have a specimen for your evaluation. Omega level. This term. Omega level. Internal protocol. It meant two things. Extreme biological hazard and top secret classification. It didn't match absolutely anything that existed on our list of known species. Less than 2 hours later, I was inside a military helicopter heading to North Cascades Special Research Facility, ... a facility that officially didn't even exist. Built underground in a mountain, it was located about 60 kilometers from Seattle. The metal beams, the cold corridors, and the smell of disinfectant already hinted at the feeling. This was no simple scientific mission, it was containment. When I walked through the double doors of the isolation ward, I noticed something that stopped my heart. Armed soldiers, doctors, in full protective gear, and blood. Lots of blood. It was thick, dark, almost black. I had never seen hemoglobin that color before. "You should prepare yourself," said Colonel Hayes, walking beside me. He seemed tense, almost trembling. "The specimen is still alive." The word specimen sounded strange, almost inhuman. I expected to see a large animal, perhaps a mutilated bear or something exotic from another region. But when I entered the containment room, my breath completely caught in my throat. There, strapped to a reinforced table, breathing with difficulty, was a being that defies any formal explanation. A Bigfoot thick, dense fur, enormous musculature, but human. Too human. His eyes, half closed with pain, held an expression not of a beast, but of someone who understood where he was. Someone who was afraid. "My God," I murmured, unable to move my hands. The colonel simply nodded. "That's why you're here. We need to know ... what he is." I approached slowly. His breathing was heavy, each exhalation seeming to tear at his lungs. There was a large wound on his chest, as if he had been struck by something enormous or by someone. When I touched his skin, I felt heat, a lot of heat. It wasn't a fever. It was as if his metabolism was absurdly faster, more efficient. And then, happened! He opened his eyes, and he looked at me, not like an animal, but like a person asking for help. That night, I realized something I'll never forget. Bigfoot was not a myth. It was an unknown primate species, intelligent, organized, and ancient. And above all, it had a secret. A secret that someone out there was desperate to keep quiet about. When Bigfoot opened his eyes and stared at me, I felt something no FBI training could have prepared me for. A mixture of panic empathy, and recognition. It was as if, at some deep level, I knew that this being wasn't just a study object. He was someone. I approached slowly while the doctors recoiled as if expecting an explosion. Bigfoot breathed with difficulty, a deep, moist, almost choked sound. His chest rose and fell unevenly, and it soon became clear why. The wound on his chest was not consistent with any known animal attack. I reached out and asked for a laser scalpel to remove some of the necrotic tissue, but even before touching the wound, I realized something impossible. "This is not a cut," I murmured. Colonel Hayes frowned. "Explain, officer." I took a deep breath. The wound had perfectly straight edges, as if someone had used a highly precise surgical instrument, the kind of cut that only experimental military equipment could make. There was no tear, scratch, or bite. There were no natural irregularities. "That's human work," I declared. Someone, opened his chest. A heavy silence fell over the room. The soldiers exchanged glances. The doctors were livid. I tried to remain calm while examining the area. The collarbone was cracked, but not dislocated. The ribs had been pushed apart and then forced closed, as if the goal was access something insidied, then cover it up. It was like an incomplete surgery hastily interrupted. He escaped from someone, I concluded, and this person knew exactly what they were looking for. The colonel pressed his lips together. "There's something you need to see, Agent Morgan." He led me to an adjoining room where 3 screens displayed thermal helicopter footage captured the previous night. The image showed the dense forest of the Cascade Mountains. Several human figures moved in formation using infrared sensors and long guns. And right behind them, running in despair, was Bigfoot. But he wasn't alone. "Are there more of them?" I asked, feeling my stomach churn. "At least 6 individuals detected," Hayes replied. "But we only managed to capture this one. The others disappeared into the woods after." He hesitated. After the attack, he concluded, finally. I returned to the containment room with a heavy heart. The creature was conscious, but struggling to breathe. I approached and spoke in a low, almost instinctive tone. "I know you can hear me. I know you understand." His eyes, large, dark, bright, focused on mine. Something there burned intensely. Fear, pain, but also intelligence. An understanding that no wild animal would possess. "He tries to." "Speak," said one of the supporting doctors. Indeed, Bigfoot moved his lips, as if trying to produce sounds. It wasn't articulate language, but there was intention. He raised his hand, enormous, strong, covered in thick hair. His arm trembled with effort as he pointed to his own wound. He was trying to say something that needed to be understood. "Write everything down, I'll ordered the doctor. If he is conscious, we should allow him to try to communicate." But before we could move forward, a red alert flashed across all screens, alarms blared. Security doors slid shut. A robotic voice filled the air. "External threat level. Shadow code, total containment." The colonel ran to the panel. They found the facility. Bigfoot reacted immediately. His eyes widened, fixed on the door. The fear was absolute, visceral, not of us, but whose arrival was coming from. And at that moment, I was certain. Someone didn't just want to study Bigfoot. Someone wanted to silence him and destroy any evidence that he existed. The alarm echoed through the underground corridors like a war siren. Red lights cut through the dimness of the medical wing, casting shadows on the white walls and making everything seem even more claustrophobic. And in the center of that storm of panic, Bigfoot breathed rapidly, his chest rising and falling as if each breath were a desperate plea for survival. "What does shadow code mean?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Colonel Hayes pressed the communicator against his shoulder. "It means that external forces have breached our perimeter. We don't know how many there are. We don't know who they are. But we know they came after him. His Bigfoot. The creature that shouldn't exist, but did. I took a step back, trying to understand. If an armed group had tracked the facility, then they knew we had captured one of their targets. Or worse, they knew that he was alive. The containment room door slammed shut with a metallic bang. The system activated. Reinforced steel plates. Everything indicated that we were about to face a real invasion. Doctors, technicians, and soldiers ran in all directions, but I stayed by the creature's side. She looked at me, not at the soldiers, not at the door, at me. And in that look, there was a plea. Don't let me go back to them. He is scared, I murmured. The colonel clenched his jaw. So maybe he knows who's coming. Bigfoot raised his arm again with enormous effort, placing his hand on my forearm. The strength, even wounded, was impressive, but there was a gentleness in his touch. He moved his fingers slowly, forming a pattern. He repeated it. Then he pointed to the door, to the wound in his chest, and to me. A doctor's eyes widened. This is gestural communication. He is trying to warn you about something. I tried to decipher it. He pointed to the cut, Gibbs pointed to the door, Gibbs touched my arm, Gibbs repeated the pattern. Then the understanding struck like a lightning bolt. They were responsible. For the cut. The colonel shook his head. What do you mean by that? He's trying to tell me that those who did this are the same ones who are coming now. Another loud bang shook the building. The lights flickered. The ventilation system vibrated. The sound was unmistakable. Explosives. The colonel ran up to me, his voice deep. Morgan, prepare him for emergency transport. If they get here, they'll shoot us all and take the body. We can't let the specimen fall into the wrong hands. I looked at the creature. It wasn't a specimen. It was conscious, injured, and terrified. He won't survive the journey, I argued. A sudden change in pressure could kill you. No alternatives. We need to understand who they are first. But there was no time for discussion. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. A soldier rushed in. They opened the first gate. Bigfoot, even on the verge of death, tried to rise from the stretcher. He was struggling against the restraints, desperate, as if he knew. Death was just a few feet away. I didn't think. I just acted. I unbuckled the stretcher's straps. Morgan, have you gone mad? Shouted the colonel. If they arrest him, we'll never have answers. The creature rolled partially to its side, supporting its weight on one arm. Its gaze burned with determination. It didn't want to die there. It wanted to escape. Then the shooting started. Gunshots echoed through the corridors. Screams. The dry thud of bodies falling to the ground. The colonel turned. To the soldiers, line of defense, protect the containment. But something inside me already knew. We weren't dealing with hunters, nor with curious onlookers, nor with ordinary soldiers. Whoever was entering knew exactly what Bigfoot was, and I wanted to make sure that no one else found out. It was at that moment that the armored door trembled under the impact of something heavy, and I realized that the real enemy wasn't inside. I was outside. The armored door trembled as if something gigantic were striking it furiously. Each impact made the ground vibrate beneath our feet. The soldiers formed an instinctive defensive line, weapons raised, fingers ready on the trigger. But none of us knew exactly what we were about to fight against. I stood beside Bigfoot. He was breathing rapidly, his skin as hot as live embers, and his eyes were fixed on the door, not with hatred, but with a terror so profound it almost paralyzed him, as if he knew the sound of those blows, as if he had been through it before. Colonel Hayes pressed the radio to his shoulder, shouted orders, called for backup, but only static responded. We were isolated. The next impact was so forceful that cracks formed in the reinforced metal. Then it happened. A sound echoed down the hallway, low, guttural, distant from any human vocalization, but definitiliera vocalization. And it wasn't just one, they were several, overlapping in different shades, like a call, a communication. The soldiers began to retreat, instinctively. The sound awakened something primal in all of us, not ordinary fear, but the clear feeling that something completely out of place was about to cross that threshold. Bigfoot crawled on the stretcher, approaching me. He touched my arm with surprising force for someone so injured. His eyes closed for a second, as if trying to convey something impossible to me. "He's trying to warn you," I said. The colonel turned around angrily. "What are you warning us about, Morgan? That there are monsters out there?" But before I could answer, the metal finally deformed. An arm, huge, dark, muscular, reached through the gap in the door, pushing the steel plates inside as if they were paper. The nearest soldiers stumbled, terrified. "There's another one," whispered a coach. "Other Bigfoot, but this one wasn't injured." I was furious. The door exploded inward. Shards of metal flew like projectiles. 2 soldiers were thrown against the wall and passed out instantly. The creature took a step back inside, and for the first time, I could see it clearly. It was bigger than the first one, at least 2.5 meters. Darker, denser fur. The eyes, they weren't like the wounded ones. They were wild. The jaw clenched, the muscles tensed, as if it were ready to destroy anything between itself and its target. And then, incredibly, he looked directly at the injured Bigfoot, and it made a sound I'll never forget. Something between a growl and a word. But the feeling was clear. Regret. Pain. Loss. "Morgan," said the colonel, stepping away from me. "Behind me. Now!" But I didn't obey. Because at that moment, the Bigfoot that was with me raised his hand, extending it to the newcomer. And in both of their eyes, there was something undeniable. Recognition. Family. Before any of us could react, the enormous Bigfoot fell to its knees, as if it were begging, as if it were pleading for mercy. And the wounded man responded, babbling weak, rhythmic sounds that seemed part of an ancient dialect. The air in the room grew heavy. It was like witnessing a reunion not meant for humans to see. But the colonel was unmoved. "Fire!" I screamed. "Nitrogen monoxide." The soldiers fired. Multiple shots fired, echoing violently. The enormous Bigfoot leaped up in a brutal jump, shielding his brother with his own body. The projectiles struck his muscles without penetrating deeply, but this only increased his fury. He roared, a roar that tore through the air, a roar that made every cell in my body free. And then the creature advanced, not against us, but against the opposite wall, clearing a path to escape. The colonel swore. "They will escape." I, however, already understood the truth. They weren't there to kill. They were there to rescue. But someone, some enemy who hadn't yet entered the fray, wanted exactly the opposite. And it was at that moment that the lights went out. Everything plunged into darkness. And within the darkness, 3 words echoed in my mind like a sentence. We are not alone. So, what was the most compelling sighting you've ever seen? Leave it in the comments. And don't forget to like if you're also fascinated by these mysterious creatures. Darkness fell upon us like an abrupt curtain. For a few seconds, all was silence, rapid breathing, and the distant echo of roars outside. The emergency generator didn't start, which meant someone had ... deliberately the electrical system was compromised. It wasn't a fault. It was sabotage. My heart pounded in my chest when a faint, red light emerged from the hallway, an emergency flashlight. Colonel Hayes held it tightly, his face tense and sweaty. Everyone, defensive positioning, Morgan with me. I approached, trying to control the trembling in my hands. The ground was vibrating slightly, not like before, with heavy impacts, but with something more rhythmic. Like footsteps. Footsteps, multiple. The wounded Bigfoot was breathing faster now. The enormous creature, which had brought down the wall, held it with surprising care, hiding it behind the rubble. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, following every detail, every sound. But something was wrong, very wrong. "Colonel," I whispered, swallowing hard. The door being smashed open. That wasn't a complete rupture, it was a controlled opening. He gave me a confused look. "Explain." I ran my hand over the twisted metal, still hot from the impact. They didn't break down the door to invade the facility. They only opened it enough to reach the injured person. They didn't destroy the system. They didn't attack the doctors. They didn't kill anyone on purpose. The colonel took a deep breath, trying to process it. "Are you suggesting that they came on a rescue mission?" Before I could answer, we heard a second sound. But it's serious, slower, more human, calculated, heavy steps, with a metallic echo, like tactical boots advancing across the concrete floor. The colonel raised the flashlight toward the corridor, and then we saw an entire team of armed men. They weren't American soldiers. They didn't wear identification. Weapons equipped with suppressors, tactical night vision goggles, and full face masks. They were not hunters. They weren't rescuers. They were eliminators. "Eye contact," a soldier murmured, 20 meters. The masked team raised their weapons in perfect synchronicity. Not a word, not a single hesitation. I took a deep breath. That was not an official operation. It was not a government task force. It was an underground group. "Turn off the lights." The colonel gave the order, but it was already dark. Then, from inside the destroyed room, the enormous Bigfoot stepped forward. Its body occupied almost the entire space of the opening. It roared loudly, not in attack, but as a warning. An ancient, protective, desperate warning. The masked men opened fire immediately. The scene turned into chaos. Bullets shot down the corridor like blades of light. Fragments of concrete fell from the ceiling. The enormous Bigfoot advanced with impressive force, placing its own body as a shield between the gunfire and the wounded man. I screamed, "Stop! He's protecting himself!" But nobody in that hallway was there to listen. A soldier beside me fell after a direct hit to the throat. Another retreated, gravely wounded. The colonel grabbed my arm violently. "Morgan, move! They're not after us! They want him dead!" And at that moment, I finally understood. There were two sides to that invisible war. Bigfoot, trying to save their kind, and humans trying to exterminate them at any cost. But there was a third side, EU. The enormous creature roared again, receiving a hail of bullets in the chest. The sound was suffocating. Each impact made his body tremble. He fell to his knees. The wounded man, though weak, crawled closer to him, touching his face. An old gesture, a gesture of farewell. I felt the air leave my lungs. My God, they are family. But the masked mercenaries allowed no time for mourning. They advanced. And then, for the first time, I heard something that froze my blood. One of them spoke. The voice came out muffled by the mask, but clear. "Eliminate the witnesses." And they pointed their guns at us. The entire hallway held its breath. I knew that this was no longer about science, nor about biology, nor about understanding. It was about erasing the truth about Bigfoot's existence, and about killing ourselves to ensure that. That's when something broke inside me. A decision, an impulse, an instinct. I would fight. For them, for the truth, for life, and for everything that was still buried in the Cascade Mountains. The masked mercenaries advanced with surgical precision, firing as they walked. They didn't shout orders. They didn't hesitate. They showed no emotion. They were machines. Machines trained to kill and to erase secrets. Colonel Hayes pulled me behind a concrete pillar. The room trembled with each burst of gunfire, but I couldn't take my eyes off the enormous creature. Lying on the floor, shielding the wounded man with its own body, That scene, two mythical beings, yet so human in their pain, ignited something within me. I couldn't let it end there. Yowie would leave. "Colonel, we have to get them out of here," I screamed. "Morgan, are you crazy? It's 6 feet of muscle. How do you intend to?" But he didn't finish, because the side door, with restricted access, unlocked itself. The electronics buzzed, and the door slid open, revealing a corridor lit by green. Emergency lights. There was no one on the other side. The colonel's eyes widened. "Who opened this?" I didn't answer, because the answer came from the wounded creature. He pointed to the hallway, urgently, clearly. He knew that exit existed. He knew. Where was it leading? That didn't make sense. But nothing happened that night. Before I could ask any more questions, the mercenaries launched stun grenades. White light, deafening sound. I momentarily lost my vision, and the colonel dragged me, shoving me into the open corridor. "Let's go!" 2 soldiers tried to carry the wounded Bigfoot, but even weakened, he was too heavy. It was then that the enormous creature, in agony, rose with impossible effort. With a low, broken roar, he lifted the wounded man as if he were a child. His body trembled, but he did not stop. And so we entered the secret corridor. The door slammed shut behind us with a bang. The colonel frantically typed codes. The mercenaries pounded on the door from the other side, but the metal was thicker than that of the entrance. At least for now, we were safe. I took a deep breath, trying to understand the situation. The corridor had old signs, with symbols I had never seen in the facility. Older architecture, different from the rest of the complex. "Where exactly are we?" I asked. The colonel hesitated. After a few seconds of silence, he replied, "This corridor was not built by the army." "So who?" He raised his finger, gesturing for silence. And he walked to a rusty door at the end of the passage. He typed in a code. The door opened with a creaking sound. Inside there was a small room, illuminated by weak incandescent bulbs, and it's full of dusty files, metal folders with old government stamps, documents dating back decades. It was a dead file, but not just any dead file. I approached the center table and saw, there on the worn surface, a brown envelope with the date 1954 and a stamp in burnt red, "Top Secret Project Goliath." My heart stopped. "What is that?" The colonel ran a hand over his face nervously. "I never thought I'd be alive to see someone open this." I opened the envelope with trembling hand. Inside it was black and white photos, anatomical diagrams, forensic reports, radio transcripts, and a map of the Cascade Mountains marked with 3 circular symbols. The photos hit me like a punch. In them appeared creatures identical to Bigfoot. But the dates printed in the corner said something that made my stomach sink. March 12, 1887, June 7, 1912, August 24, 1933. They had existed for over 100 years, documented by the government itself. But the worst was yet to come. At the bottom of the envelope was a short, handwritten report, almost illegible due to age. I read aloud. "They are not animals. They are not beasts. They are the forgotten branch of humanity, a parallel lineage. And if they've survived this far, it's because they know we're trying to eliminate them. They know our species. And they are afraid of us." I closed the paper slowly. The wounded Bigfoot was watching me. His eyes reflected more than just pain, but understanding. They knew. They always knew. And now, I knew it too. And that made me a target. The paper trembled between my fingers. Not from its physical weight, but from the historical weight of what I had just read. With each sentence, I felt my scientific background, years studying evolution, primates, hominid ancestors, tremble like a house of cards about to collapse. Forgotten branch of humanity. Those words echoed within the silent room, mingling with the panting breath of the wounded Bigfoot and the distant sound of muffled explosions from the other side of the complex. Colonel Hayes approached, glancing over my shoulder. "Do you understand what this means, Morgan?" I took a deep breath, trying to formulate the answer. "It means ... we're not talking about an animal, nor a legend. We're talking about ... relatives." The colonel nodded slowly. Relatives whom someone, long ago, decided to erase from history. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. As an evolutionary biologist, I had studied extinct lineages, lost branches, human species that disappeared even before written language existed. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared my brain to accept the idea that a parallel lineage, so advanced, so complex, still walked through the forests of Washington. And worse, the government knew. There is more than a century. I looked again at the wounded Bigfoot. He was observing everything with silent attention, as if trying to assess whether he could trust us. But there was something different now. His gaze wasn't just fear, it was recognition. Maybe he knew exactly what was in that envelope. Maybe he recognized the Project Goliath symbol printed on the papers. And then I realized something. They had seen this before. They had already been studied or hunted by humans. I went back to the envelope and took out a second document. This one dated ... 1964. It was an audio transcript between two research directors. They are not aggressive, except when provoked. They maintain complex social structures, advanced communication with repetitive patterns, estimated IQ equivalent to that of Homo erectus, possibly higher. Immediate disposal is recommended to prevent public discovery. The colonel swallowed hard. They already knew that they were intelligent. I pressed my lips together, and they decided that this made everything even more dangerous. The enormous Bigfoot, even wounded by the gunshots, watched intently as I spread more documents across the table. He leaned forward, touching one of the old photos. His huge toes traced the outline of a black and white Bigfoot photograph from 1912. The gesture was human, sad, melancholy. "He acknowledges," I murmured. "He knows who they are." The colonel exhaled a long sigh. "Perhaps they are ancestors, or tribes of theirs, captured in the past." I looked at the enormous creature, which was now trembling, not from pain, but from emotion. "He is crying." Try. His eyes were moist. The power of that scene hit me like an avalanche. These beings, called monsters, myths, threats, had memory. They had a history. They had memories about us, perhaps even about captures, deaths, experiments. I felt a deep pain in my chest, because it was clear that for them, us humans, we were the real terror. Before I could delve deeper into the analysis, the colonel received a short, coded transmission on his radio. "Coronel Hayes," said a male voice, thick with static, "the inner perimeter has been secured. The shadow forces are advancing to the underground level. The orders are to annihilate all who remain." Hayes gripped the communicator tightly. "Back to Point Alpha." "Negative," the voice replied. "They've already taken Alpha. I repeat, Alpha is compromised." The colonel turned pale. "They are cornering us." I felt my stomach sink. They weren't just coming for Bigfoot. They came by us because now ... we knew too much. The colonel stared at me, his breathing rapid. "Morgan, there is no more protocol. There is no mission. There is only survival. This file, this project, is an existential risk for anyone who knows about it." I looked at the envelope. For the injured Bigfoot. For the enormous man who was trying to stay on his feet despite the gunfire. And then I realized the hardest truth of that night. They didn't just want to kill Bigfoot. They wanted to erase his history and our connection with them. I closed the envelope, held it firmly, and declared, "So we will survive, and we will take the truth with us." The colonel stared at me for a few seconds. Then he nodded. And it was at that moment that the hallway door exploded. The war was far from over. The explosion shook the walls as if the entire mountain were collapsing on top of us. Shrapnel flew, dust filled the air, and a high-pitched buzzing sound filled my ears. Colonel Hayes pulled me behind a metal bookcase as the door crumbled in a shower of incandescent fragments. And that's when I saw they had entered. The masked men, now illuminated by the flickering light of the corridor's green lamps, advanced like murderous shadows. No words, no commands, just raised weapons and the precision of human predators. The enormous Bigfoot let out a hoarse roar, a sound that mixed pain and defiance, and positioned itself in front of the wounded man once more, like a living shield. The mercenaries opened fire without hesitation. The bullets ricocheted off the ground, ripped chunks from the walls, tore through the air too close to me. "Morgan, go! Get the file!" shouted the colonel, shoving the envelope against my chest. "Run!" I didn't think about it. Instinct took over. I crossed the room toward a smaller side door, half hidden behind an old cabinet. The enormous Bigfoot tried to follow me, but fell to his knees again. He was bleeding profusely. The injured man did something unexpected. He held out his hand to me and pointed to the door 3 times, like a ritual, a sign. "They want us to escape that way," I murmured, almost in disbelief. The colonel came to my side, helping the enormous creature to its feet. 2 remaining soldiers formed a line of cover, firing at the invaders. "Morgan, open that door." My hands were trembling, but I managed to enter the emergency code. The door opened slowly, revealing a steep descent illuminated by old lamps. It was a tunnel. Old. Too old. "What is that?" I asked, startled. Hayes took a deep breath, as if carrying an old guilt. "It's the remains of a facility that predates the modern complex, built before the 70s. Officially, it doesn't exist." The enormous Bigfoot lifted the wounded man in his arms and walked into the tunnel, limping but focused. They knew that path. How? Why? These questions would haunt me later. Now, there was only one priority: to survive. The colonel and I followed right behind, and the door slammed shut. Through the small bulletproof glass window, we watched the mercenaries storm into the archives. But the tunnel entrance, which even the current government didn't know existed, remained completely hidden. "They think we're dead," I whispered. "And that gives us a few minutes," Hayes replied. The descent was long and narrow, with cracked concrete walls and old pipes leaking steam. The air grew hotter with each step. The sound of gunfire faded into the distance, becoming just a memory. After a few meters, I noticed something unsettling. The wounded Bigfoot looked at the symbols on the walls, and he recognized them. Circular markings, tribal symbols etched into the still damp concrete decades ago. Lines that formed patterns I had never seen before, but which he followed with his fingers as if reading a sacred text. "My God," I murmured. "They've been here before us." Hayes took a deep breath. "Morgan, this tunnel wasn't dug by the army. We only reinforced the walls afterward, but the original structure, it's theirs." I finished, my voice breaking. The revelation fell upon me like an unbearable weight. Decades, perhaps centuries, before any military installation existed on that mountain, the Bigfoot themselves were already using that path. Like roots, like homes, like temples. And we built on top of that. Like someone building a building on top of a cemetery without knowing it, or worse, knowing it. We've reached a fork in the road. The tunnel on the right had a slight draft of cold air. The one on the left was dark and stuffy. The enormous Bigfoot looked at the injured man as if asking for guidance. And the wounded man, though weak, raised his arm with effort and pointed to the left. The colonel frowned. "Are you sure?" This path may be crumbling, Morgan, but I already knew. He's not guessing. He's remembering. The enormous creature walked to the left. We continue. I could feel my heart in my throat. After a few minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a huge, natural underground room with stone columns and light streaming through a crack in the mountain ceiling. And in the center of the cave had Brants in the walls, paintings, symbols, and human figures, and pictures of him. My feet stopped moving on their own. That's not possible. Hayes approached, looking around, perplexed. Morgan. That's prehistoric. Before I could fully process the discovery, the enormous Bigfoot let out a low sound. A warning. The wounded man was trembling, and his eyes, previously half closed, were now fixed on the entrance to the cave. Someone else had arrived there, and it wasn't human. We were not alone in that tunnel. The cave was breathing. That was the only way to describe the feeling, as if the living, damp walls pulsed with an ancient energy. The warm air swirled, rising in small waves that distorted the faint light coming from the crack in the ceiling. That place. It wasn't just a cave. It was a sanctuary. The wounded Bigfoot watched everything with teary eyes, like someone revisiting childhood after decades away. The enormous creature, his protector, stood in front, cautiously sniffing the air, muscles tense, as if sensing something we couldn't see. Colonel Hayes raised his lantern, sweeping the walls. Morgan. Look at this. The light revealed cave paintings, figures of tall, furry beings alongside human beings, hunting scenes, scenes of coexistence, and then scenes of conflict. Silhouettes of humans wielding spears and fire confronting giant silhouettes. It was an entire story recorded there. A story that didn't exist in any book, any museum, any scientific article. They lived together. I murmured. Humans and Bigfoot, not as monsters, but as distinct peoples who interbred. My voice sounded small in that monumental void. The colonel pointed to a particular painting, a human figure handing something to a giant figure, a circular object divided into 3 parts, exactly the same as the symbols we saw in the Project Goliath documents. Morgan. This is older than any known archaeological record. Hayes. This changes everything, I replied, almost breathless. Before I could continue analyzing, the enormous Bigfoot roared low, a deep, guttural warning that reverberated through the cave like muffled thunder. I froze. What was that? That's when we heard it. A slow drag, heavy, as if something big were approaching through the darkness of the tunnel from which we came. Hayes raised its weapon. The remaining soldiers followed the movement, their hands trembling. Contact is approaching! Light! Ordinu Hayes. But before anyone could even provide any visual cue, the silhouette appeared, and it stopped. And for the second time that night, I felt the world around me lose its meaning. It was a Bigfoot, bigger than the enormous one that accompanied us, more robust. Gray hairs around the shoulders and skull, signs of advanced age. But her eyes? His eyes held something different, not fear, not rage, wisdom. He was old, a patriarch, perhaps a leader, perhaps the last guardian of a nearly extinct lineage. The enormous Bigfoot took 2 steps forward and then knelt down. My heart raced as I watched a scene that looked like it had been taken from a lost 19th century documentary. The immense creature bowed to the elder, touching the ground with its forehead, a ritualistic gesture of respect. The wounded man, even on the verge of death, tried to repeat the gesture but could barely move. The old man approached him, placing his large, calloused hand on his bleeding chest. He closed his eyes for a moment, and then he let out a deep, repetitive sound, like a prayer. I swallowed hard. Hayes. I know. he murmured. "We are watching a ceremony." But the peace of that moment was broken by a distant crack, a muffled explosion. The Expendables. They had found another entrance. The old man opened his eyes, and I saw in them what I most feared to see: fear. He lifted the wounded man in his arms with a strength that didn't seem to belong to someone of that age. With his other arm, he made a gesture towards us, a gesture that any human would recognize. "Run. Colonel E wants us to go that way," I said, pointing to a narrow, almost invisible side tunnel behind a natural stone column. The three Bigfoots began to move. The huge one in front. The old man was right behind, carrying the wounded man. And we, the last humans who still knew the truth, chasing after them like fugitives from a forbidden secret. Before disappearing into the tunnel, I turned around for a second, and I saw the shadows of the mercenaries entering the cave, and the metallic glint of weapons being raised. And then, the colonel's voice sounded behind me. "Morgan, if we die here, the world will never know the truth about Bigfoot." I pressed the envelope against my chest. "So we're not going to die." And we plunged into darkness. Would you have the courage to help an injured Bigfoot? Or would you run away? Comment yes or no. The darkness of the tunnel seemed alive, almost pulsating, as we advanced after the Bigfoots. The enormous one led the way, clearing a path with its broad shoulders. The old one followed closely behind, carrying the wounded creature as if it were a cub, even though it was a body heavy enough to crush a grown man. And we humans ran after them, stumbling in the shadows, breathless, struggling to keep up with beings that moved with a precision born only of ancestral instinct. Hot and cold winds alternated as if the mountain were breathing. In some sections, the ceiling dropped so low that we had to crouch. In others, the tunnel opened into small caves, full of stalactites that dripped down on us like rain. But what really tightened my chest was the distant sound behind us. Steps. Weapons being loaded. Muffled whispers. They were close. Colonel ... We're going too slowly, I murmured, struggling to catch my breath. Hayes shook his head. We cannot leave them behind. These beings have saved us more times than I can count. I knew it was true, but I also knew that if we continued like this, we would all die inside those tunnels. That's when we arrived at a gigantic opening. The narrow tunnel gave way to a natural abyss, a deep vertical cavern, at least 50 meters high. It was like an ancient chimney in the heart of the mountain. The wind rose from the darkness, icy and cutting. And on the other side, a narrow corridor led to an exit I couldn't see. "This is a well," I whispered. "Lost well," murmured the colonel. "I heard rumors on old maps, but I thought it was just a myth." It was not a myth. Nothing that night mattered. The enormous Bigfoot cautiously approached the edge of the abyss. His eyes assessed the distance to the other side. About 3 meters. For a human, impossible. For him, perhaps. The old man carefully placed the wounded Bigfoot on the ground. He touched its face for a moment, a silent farewell gesture, and then looked at us. And he walked to the abyss. He raised a huge hand and pointed to the other side, repeating the gesture twice. He wanted us to jump. He's telling us to cross the street. I noticed. "Morgan, that's suicide," said Hayes, his voice trembling. The enormous creature took a few steps back, took a deep breath, and ran. In 2 steps, he gained momentum, and he jumped. The world seemed to stop as he crossed the gap, his gigantic body cutting through the air like a mythological shadow until he touched the other side with a dry but firm impact. He immediately turned, extending his arms, preparing to receive the wounded man. The old man, with ritualistic care, lifted the dying Bigfoot and made a sign for silence to us. Then he murmured something low, almost a prayer, and then he jumped too. His jump was smaller, more calculated. He didn't have the strength of the enormous one, but he had technique. He tilted his body at the perfect moment, landing with a low roar and almost falling, but he was caught by the enormous one, who pulled them both away from the edge. Hayes looked at me. "Morgan, we can try a side jump, use the momentum." But before he could finish, a gunshot rang out behind us. Stones shattered against the wall. The sound reverberated like thunder. "They arrived," I whispered, feeling my blood run cold. The colonel raised his weapon. "Morgan, go first. I can't leave you. That's an order." I took a deep breath. The abyss seemed like a black mouth poised to swallow any mistake I made. But behind us, ... certain death lay, and on the other side, there was hope. And that's the truth. I pressed the envelope against my chest, and I ran. The wind whipped against my face as my feet left the ground. For a second, I felt utter emptiness, suspended in midair. No ground beneath my feet, no certainty, no control. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like it was tearing my chest apart. And then, a huge shadow approached. The enormous Bigfoot stretched out its arms. I hit him hard, but he held me as if I were as light as a child. I heard the colonel shout my name, then another shot, and then silence. "Colonel!" I screamed, but all I heard again, it was the distant roar of something that had just happened on the other side of the abyss. Something that shouldn't have happened. Something changed everything that night, and what I heard was inhuman. The roar echoed through the lost well like an invisible wave that coursed through my bones. I didn't know if it was human, Bigfoot, or something in between, but I knew it was coming from the colonel's side. The enormous creature was still holding me as I tried to run back to the edge, but he pulled my arm forcefully, preventing me from falling into the abyss. "Let go!" I shouted. Hayes could still, but that's when I heard it. Morgan. His voice, weak, muffled, but alive, pierced the dark echo of the tunnel. The colonel was on the other side, wounded, and not alone. Two of the masked mercenaries surrounded him. One of them held him by the shoulders, forcing him to his knees. The other was frantically searching his pockets. They were looking for the envelope. "Colonel!" I screamed. The enormous Bigfoot pulled me further back, protecting me as he always did. The old man remained motionless, observing the scene with tense eyes, while the wounded man's breathing grew weaker and weaker. The mercenaries finally concluded that Hayes didn't have the file. What they did next wasn't interrogation nor intimidation. It was an execution. The first masked man pulled out a knife, a curved blade, identical to the pattern of the wound on the chest of the injured Bigfoot. The colonel saw me, and for the first time since I met him, he smiled, a weak but peaceful smile. "Morgan, ... tell the truth. Don't let them erase it. Understand?" I felt my heart being ripped from my chest. No. But the mercenary did not hesitate. The coup was precise, deep, airplane. The colonel collapsed. Silently. The wind from the well carried away my cry as if it were swallowing my pain. I had seen deaths before, but never like this. Never so cold. Never so planned. The mercenaries turned to us. They had finally realized what the enormous Bigfoot already knew instinctively. They weren't there to eliminate creatures. They were there to eliminate it-ness. The enormous creature roared, lunging to the edge as if ready to leap back and face them alone. "But!" The old man placed his hand on its shoulder, pulling it back. It emitted low, deep sounds, like short commands in an ancient tongue. It was clear. The enormous one wanted to fight. The old man wanted to survive. I was trembling, of guilt, horrifying, of impotence. But amidst the pain, something shone. The knife that killed the colonel. The blade used to wound the injured Bigfoot. That knife. He wasn't a soldier. It wasn't handmade. I knew her. From biology. The cutting pattern. Precision. The curvature. It was a blade used in Primate cranial dissection, a scientific instrument. My blood ran cold. These mercenaries ... are not hunters. The old man turned his head, listening to me. I continued, they are scientists, or they work for them. They've opened up a Bigfoot before, maybe several. The old man seemed to understand my tone, if not my words. His eyes, once filled with wisdom, now shone with something very human: anger. A new rumble shook the tunnel. The mercenaries were trying to go around the well to reach us. "Morgan," said a low, deep voice behind me. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. But no. The wounded man, even though he was dying, was trying to speak. The words were scratchy, guttural, but they were words. Exit. Light. North. My heart raced. He was pointing to an exit. One direction. A map. The old man lifted the wounded man in his arms. The enormous thing grabbed my hand, and then the entire tunnel filled with shadows. The mercenaries had reached our side of the abyss. "They go!" I shouted. "Run." The old man disappeared into the darkness with the wounded man. The enormous creature grabbed my arm and ran off with superhuman speed. Behind us, gunshots began to echo. Stones fell. The mountains screamed. And then, for the first time that night, the truth hit me completely. The colonel died because he chose the right side, and now I needed to do the same. Running through the darkness of a narrow tunnel, guided by creatures that shouldn't exist, while armed men hunted us like animals. That's the most vivid memory of my life. Every step echoed like a warning that we were on the edge of time, air, and even our own luck. The enormous creature kept its hand on my wrist, pulling me with enough force to make me float for entire stretches of the tunnel. The old man, in front, carried the wounded man with a determination that tore at his heart. And this one, the wounded Bigfoot, was already breathing so weakly that each exhalation seemed like a farewell. The mercenaries behind us weren't shouting. They weren't running in desperation. They were coming in silence. They hunted in silence. They killed in silence. And that made everything worse. The wounded man murmured something. The old man stopped. He touched his face. The enormous creature roared softly, as if denying the approaching reality. "No," I whispered, swallowing the pain. "Not now." But the wounded man opened his eyes and fixed them on me, as if he were saving his last strength only for that. Raised his arm, trembling, and pointed to my backpack, where I kept the Project Goliath envelope. He knew what was inside. He knew what it meant. He knew I needed to survive. His breath caught in his throat. It failed again, and then it stopped. The old man roared a roar so deep, so sad, so brutally human, that I felt my soul give way. The enormous man bowed his head, pressing his forehead against the wounded man's, in a gesture that transcends species, languages, and centuries. And then, without warning, gunshots, stones flew, dust exploded all around us. The mercenaries had reached the final bend in the tunnel. The enormous thing shoved my shoulder hard. A clear gesture. "Run," I obeyed. The old man lifted the wounded man's body once more, not as one carries a burden, but as one carries a memory. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming in the darkness, and then pointed upwards. When I looked, I saw the light, a tear in the mountain, a narrow, almost invisible opening, hidden among the rocks, but enough for a human, an exit, the exit. The mercenaries continued advancing. The enormous creature turned and roared with such force that the entire tunnel trembled. The old man placed the wounded man's body on a rocky ledge as a final resting place, and then positioned himself beside the enormous creature. They were going to fight. They were going to defend that last stretch. They would die if necessary, based on my data. I murmured, crying without realizing it, for the truth. enormous creature stared at me one last time. That look, I'll never forget it. It was a go, it was a hooray, it was a tale. I scaled the rocks with trembling hands, using ledges so small that any mistake would have sent me back to hell. The sun beat down on my face as I reached the opening. Outside, the snow glistened. The icy air cut through my skin. Freedom has never seemed so cruel. Before leaving completely, I looked back one last time. The old man and the enormous one advanced. Against the mercenaries, I don't eat animals. Not like monsters, but how parents defending their children. Like warriors defending their species. As the last guardians of an entire people condemned to silence, the gunfire swallowed the tunnel. A final roar echoed, and then silence. I went out into the snow. I fell to my knees, and I cried until my body gave out. When government helicopters found me hours later, I knew exactly what I would do. I would deliver a controlled version, targeted, empty, enough that they won't kill me, but true enough to haunt me for the rest of my life. And that's how I became who I am today, the FBI agent who discovered the true origin of Bigfoot. The woman who saw what no one should see, the last witness of a lost lineage. And now, for the first time, I'll tell you everything. Because they died so that the world would finally know the truth.